Artists are often stuck inside, either by our own design or by the nature of our work. We would all benefit from getting outside a little more, but sometimes it simply feels like too much work. Too different from our normal, or maybe it's just cold because it's winter right now. So let's go over why it's important for us as artists specifically to get outside, and then some quick ideas on how we can do so. My name is Zach, and welcome to the podcast. If this and other discussions about things like art block, artist self-care, and the like is your cup of tea, please consider subscribing. I don't think I need to go through the usual method of defining getting outside, so let's simply dive into some of the benefits of doing so for us as artists. Observational skills and visual memory. This might seem super obvious, but if you want to draw people, it might help to get out and actually see some people. Get out and see how they function in the real world. Likewise, if you have any intention of drawing backgrounds, landscapes, architecture, or any natural forms, being outside and absorbing those through your own two eyes is going to massively benefit you. Even if you don't sit down and awkwardly draw that person as they walk by you, you are observing, recording details about the world and archiving them somewhere in the confines of your mind. I have had the lovely opportunity to travel, and now I have places saved in the confines of that mind. When I think of trees, I can easily go to the mountains around home to find the aspens and the ponderosa pines that grace our Colorado mountains and hills. I can find them in various states of leaf or lack thereof. We get beautiful autumn leaves on the aspens when the entire side of a hill flushes yellow, and although the sorrow of our frequent wildfires is ever present, the aspens tend to spring up in those areas quickly afterward, and we get these lovely swaths of gold and amber and orange in the autumn as they turn before finally losing their leaves for the winter. I can go to Iceland and I can find the strange twisted native trees that most of the Vikings cut down 1,000 years ago. It might not have been 1,000 years ago, but it was quite a long time ago. Most of the trees in Iceland have vanished. They've had to be replanted, and so you will actually see these strange plots of trees grown almost like an orchard, but it's simply just to grow wood and to reclaim some forest in that land. However, the native trees of Iceland are gnarled. They seem to bend into the wind, which makes sense given the astronomical levels of wind and crazy weather that they get there. They have the same saying in Iceland that we do here in Colorado, which I found humorous when my wife and I first visited there, which is, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes and it'll change. I thought this was just a Colorado thing, but it turns out it's at least an Iceland thing also. I've also been to the forests in Northern California with the giant redwoods and sequoias. These massive trees that really seem like they're out of Lord of the Rings. They are crazy, so big in fact that sometimes you can even bore a hole through one and drive your car through. It's really remarkable to have these things in my memory, and I only have these because I've explored, I've gotten out, and I've adventured in the world. Think about the fact that if you have a pet, if you have a cat, a dog, a bird perhaps, you are likely better at drawing those things, better at understanding the trueness of their form because you encounter them frequently. It is not dissimilar when you think about getting out into the world and experiencing things. If you want to draw buildings, if you want to work with concept art, or just illustrate something for your own benefit, looking at bridges, at trains, at buildings, awnings, and patios, being around them gives you a visual memory, something to go back to, and then a better execution of that thing. Now, not all of us have the ability to go in and actually find the visual memory, but you will gain, I think, without fail, an ability to see that something is wrong in your drawing if something does go awry. If you've been around a lot of trains, for example, you might not be able to go find one perfectly inside of your head, but you will know that your drawing of one is wrong when it is, and that will give you the inclination to go look up a resource to help you on that path. I ran into this with students a lot. The students who had horses, for example, were always much better at drawing them than the students that didn't, and horses are quite difficult to draw. There's some weird tricks to the anatomy of their faces that makes them really difficult. The same is true for dogs and cats. The students that had dogs and cats were better at drawing them, even if they had never drawn them before. I would reckon that this is true for pretty much everything that we look at as artists. So getting outside, seeing the world as it really is, will only aid your ability to illustrate it and depict it. Stress reduction and perspective is another area that I like to explore. I will not bore you with the scientific journals and evidence over the years, but getting outside, taking some time away from the four walls within which you live, can do amazing things for your stress and anxiety. And I mention the scientific journals because there are some. In the initial script of this podcast, I went and I researched, and I was able to find very quickly a number of resources that talked about we don't necessarily know why this works, but there is massive correlation between getting outside and being physically active and reductions in stress and anxiety levels. Breathing different air, feeling the warmth of the sun, or even the cold of winter's wind is good for you. It is good for me. It stimulates different sensations and senses and kicks you out of whatever typical mindset you inhabit. Being outside gives you a new perspective, or at least a different one. We need change in our lives, especially as artists. We need to encounter more things because we put them down with every stroke of our pencil, pen, or key. For me, the biggest component of this is that it pulls me out of whatever mindset I'm in at the moment. If I get outside right now in early January, the first thing I'm going to notice is the cold, and then perhaps the wind, depending on what kind of day it is up here in the hills. But that is going to immediately make me cognizant of my body, cognizant of my humanity, as it were. My flesh, if I have not bothered to cover it with adequate clothing, will immediately tell me that it is upset with me and that I need to put on a hoodie or a jacket or something. It's pretty much impossible from my perspective to be stressed about the same things that I was stressed about 5 minutes ago when I'm having to deal with the very physical reality of the wind buffeting my face. Now, this doesn't mean that the stress is going to disappear, that I'm going to go back inside and whatever I was anxious about is no longer going to be present. But it will shift me out of that. And if you're anything like me and many that I know, where we can get in these cycles in our head, where you just go back and forth on the same thing, really unproductively, kicking yourself out of that by getting outside can be just the thing to move forward. Because when I do come back inside, inevitably, my mind is going to return to that thing that was causing me stress and anxiety. However, now I have a little bit of perspective. I've no longer been attached to it for the last 45 minutes. I've been detached for the last 15. And it's easier, even in that time window, to have a little bit more perspective and understanding about the thing, about how serious or silly it actually is in reality. Now, here's a really practical benefit. Working from life is a fantastic break from photographs. We have all heard it in our art classes that you have to work from life. I heard it hundreds of times at university and in high school, but it took a long time for that reality to sink in. From my perspective, the largest reason to do this is that our eyes and brains pick up information very differently from life than they do from a photograph or a screen. Our eyes pick up information separately and then relay it to our brains. This results in depth perception, the ability to see distance. Every photograph compresses this information into a single reality, a flat image, but the world is not flat, and our eyes can actually pick up on that and detect it. So working from trees in nature, drawing a dog in the backyard, or whatever it is you decide to work from, actually communicates new and different information to our brains than does a photograph. There is something primal about sitting outside and simply looking around for things to draw. You require no plan, and the world will keep throwing new things at you as long as you remain out in it. Drawing from life will often teach you very different things. And this is the reason why you're art teachers and why I, as an art teacher, pushed my students to do this. I would set up still lives in the middle of the room, or sometimes we would go outside and we would actually draw from nature. But inevitably, working from something that you can see, that the light reflects off of differently, that the shadows cast are different based on the time of day or the lights that you set up, well, it makes you think. And it makes your art different. Inevitably so. You have to think about what you're doing. And when you draw figures from life, well, they don't stay still. Even if you are working with professional models, they move because they breathe. I don't know exactly how that communicates different things into your artwork, but it must, because it's very, very different than the flat image. You can see the roundness of form. You can see how cloth falls and perhaps how it moves as that person walks through the market. You observe different things. And not only does your visual memory benefit from this, but your analysis of the moment benefits. And if you are trying to depict a thing, using your eyes as opposed to just using a screen or using a single eye, because the oculus of whatever took that photo is really just a singular lens, benefits you tremendously. And frankly, working from people, especially if you want to draw characters or you want to work on figures, drawing people in motion, sitting down at the airport when you're waiting for a plane to arrive, which is really dreadfully boring and sometimes anxiety-ridden. If you sit down and you actually just draw the people that are waiting with you, it's kind of fascinating. You end up going through in your head and trying to figure out, well, who is this person? Why are they wearing what they're wearing? They really seem to be comfortable in those pajama pants, but that must take a certain level of confidence to be able to wear that out in public at an airport. What is this guy doing? He's asleep and maybe he's gonna miss his flight, but maybe there's a story there. Maybe he's trying to get home to surprise his daughter for the first birthday of his grandchild. And you can construct these stories and these images in your mind and run wild with them. Things like this happen when you get out in the world, when you leave the confines of your studio. And of course, colors change. Colors are always different. I'm a little bit frustrated actually watching the drawing play out here in the background because the greens seem so vibrant and they really weren't on the actual drawing. I can look over at the drawing right now and those greens are actually quite dull. But something in the way that I lit it, something in the way that it was recorded, communicates that green is quite fluorescent. And it's not. I had the intention of it being more of a dull plains or a swamp in this underground environment. And yet here it is looking fluorescent. And this just proves the point that colors are not the same on a screen. They are not the same in a photograph as they are in reality. They're often more subtle in reality. They fluctuate from color to color. The blue has 17 different tones in it in a single piece of cloth. And some of those, if you take them into Photoshop and you actually use the eyedropper, are not even blue anymore. They're reds and violets and grays and browns. How does this happen? Well, that's the thing, is reality is far more detailed and intricate than we know. And getting outside can help with that, especially when we get away from using photos only. You know, also, fresh air is just good for you. I mean, it's good for everyone, but as artists, not only does it help our lungs and afford us some vitamin D, it helps with our mental clarity and creativity. There are many scientific and medical studies exploring the benefits of getting outside, seeing the sun, and breathing fresh air. Though I am no scientist, the benefits such sources discovered include lowered anxiety, helping to maintain a healthy sleep cycle, improving your immune system function, and retaining better focus. From my experiences living in Colorado, where everyone seems to get outside, getting outside simplifies the world for me. There is so much to watch, to see, to hear that I struggle to focus on the worries that accompanied me when I walked into nature. And that's a great feeling. And of course, I mentioned this in the prior one as well. Few things can jog you out of a rut, though, or simply move you to a different space than getting outside. I feel like we as artists forget this. Like, we're cell dwellers. We hang out in the basement working on screens and we hiss at the sun. And although this stereotype is not always true, there is some truth in it. I did poorly with this last season myself. For all my excitement about the garden and the spring, I spent too much time inside. And when fall hit, and I should have been receiving multitudes of tomatoes from my garden, I had a few struggling plants because I had not dedicated adequate time to them. And this makes me sad. This isn't something that necessarily is going to hit every single one of you, but it is a personal thing for me. The spring is my favorite time of year, when green things are finally bursting forth out of the frozen soil. I love winter too, but it feels like it goes on just a little bit longer than I want it to. And I actually feel this way for every season except for spring. I like fall, but then I get bored because we don't have snow. I like snow, but then I get bored because things aren't growing. But when spring gets here, when it's still cold and all the beautiful things are beginning to push through that soil, that is the happiest time of year for me. There are many unanticipated things that happen when you get outside. Nature is random, and we will often run into things we did not anticipate, and these can be exciting or can spur us to new thoughts and new ideas. Depending where you live, you might see more people or more animals. If it's me and I'm being honest, I prefer seeing the more animals. Each come with their own benefits, however, whether for observation or amusement. I am fortunate to live in a place where my trek down the driveway this morning with the trash can collided with several deer and wild turkeys in the distance. These random occurrences can spur ideas. They can jog you out of your normal thought process or just bring you some joy in the midst of your day. It is easy to get stuck in a routine, and getting outside will often provide the method of unstucking oneself. You cannot control everything, and getting outside seems to make that all the more clear. As you walk, you observe, try to do it without music. Just listen to the things around you. Hopefully you have some measure of open space about you, some natural space to enjoy, and some annoying squirrels to watch. If you live in a city large enough that you do not have access to any trails, any open grass, any forests, then, well, I feel a little bit sad. Though maybe you listening to this think that's silly. There are also a lot of benefits to getting out in the big city, though, to see all of the interesting kinds of people and to smell all of the interesting foods. Whenever I travel around the world, I love seeing what kind of food is served on the street corners. In Boulder, Colorado, which is not terribly that far from where we live, they always have a couple carts that just mostly sell hot dogs, but they sell wild game hot dogs. And I am just drawn to them with a primal need to have a hot dog. And I very seldom resist it, because there are little joys like that in the world that one ought not resist all the time. There's also a falafel place that often has its door open and the falafel just like flows out, the scent of it. And I don't know that I've ever refused falafel when it has been available to me. So these are city things, city benefits, things that I don't have. If I walk outside here, I'm more likely to smell a septic tank than I am to smell something delicious. Physical activity is an undeniable component of getting outside as well. Getting outside, unless you roll out of your window, I suppose, forces us to be active in at least a minor way. For most people, this will take the form of walking, putting one foot before the other and heading outside. I think it behooves us to actually be more physical, to move around a bit, and even if you simply get outside for a little while, in a park or on the porch, you've moved. You've changed position, and your body and mind will thank you for it. For your brain, changing your scenery is an obvious start of something new, and it can be helpful if you need to walk away from a stressful project or from work for a moment. For your body, well, we need the movements more the older we get, and I am getting old. It prevents soreness the more that you move, because you evenly distribute your body weight instead of it always being on your butt while you're sitting in a chair or on a stool like I am right now. Stretching your muscles, your tendons, your ligaments prevents things from hurting, and it prevents things from getting so tensed up that they get pulled, strained, or broken. You will often sleep better if you get outside and you actually make sure that you're physically active. And it feels less bad when you have to eat that extra piece of fried chicken, because you know what? I probably burned off the calories today on that walk during work. I can have the extra wing. Physical activity is its own can of worms, and I've thought about having a podcast that's specifically on physical activity and the necessity of it for artists. It may have come out by now, I don't think so, though, and I may do that. So if you're interested in that specifically, like the specific benefits of physical activity for artists, just let me know in the comments below. But let's move on to a rather intriguing one that will probably be no strange fact to anybody who's listened to me ramble for any amount of time. Getting outside reminds you that you are human. It forces you to confront the fact that you're a biological being made up of muscles and bones and flesh and tissue, and that you are a part of a system. A little discomfort, the wind blowing our work around, reminds us that we are human, not some sterile computer program. We are not gods, we do not run the universe, and sometimes we need to be reminded of that. Now, this seems silly on one side, right? We are 100% aware of the fact that we don't control all of the facets of the universe. When we fail to take time specifically to think about our place in things, it can be easy to assume naturally that we have control of way more than we actually have control of. As humans, we are wonderful, beneficial, complicated beings, and yet we are so simple and so finite, so predictable in so many ways. And it can be beneficial to us to remember that. When you get outside, you are inevitably confronted with the fact that you have to move, that you feel the world around you, you smell things, you see things, you hear things, and you feel things. And this can only happen because you have the unique privilege of being a human. I talk about this a lot on this channel, and I am not 100% sure why, but I think sometimes, maybe especially now, with all of our technology, the ability to dive into the internet for infinite quantities of time, I feel like we as a race have gotten away from this concept of we are fleshy corporeal beings. We are not digital avatars. And no one really seems to believe that we are, but the actions of a lot of people seem to imply that that is what they believe. So, believe that you are human. Know that you are human. Remember that you are human. And deal with your flesh and how it aches. The pains and the joys of living in this suit of flesh. Lastly, for this chunk, it's a break from routine. I've hit on this throughout the podcast, but it warrants a spot here as the final component of our list. Breaking from routine is one of the best things you can do creatively. Staring at the same screen, sitting at the same spot, it's not good for innovation. Going for a walk, sitting on the deck and listening to the birds breaks that monotony. It helps chip away the rust of our bad mood. Alright, well that has been a whole bunch of different benefits of getting outside. Hopefully one of these makes sense to you, one of these really jives with you. I was gonna say vibe, but I still don't really feel like I'd understand how to use it because I'm in my 30s and I'm just too old for that nonsense. Not that it's nonsense, but it feels like that because I'm an old man. Sorry. So here are some quick ideas for getting outside more, dear artist. Go for a walk. Obviously, we talked about this a whole bunch, and it's a pretty obvious one. If you live anywhere where it is safe to get outside, where the weather or the circumstances don't force you to stay in, get outside and walk around. Just give yourself 10 or 15 minutes on your lunch break. If you're still in school, in high school, you might not be able to do this, but maybe you still have recess or some component that is similar to that. But get outside. Try to get outside at least once a day and just walk around. You don't have to work out, you don't have to run, you don't have to do it quickly, and you can take a friend or two with you. I used to do this when I was still teaching at the school the last couple years when things were a little difficult, especially with the pandemic and all of that. So I would take a friend and we would go for a 15-20 minute walk around one of the neighborhoods. There were beautiful trees and greenbelt areas, dogs that would bark at us as we walked by, but mostly it was just being outside and in the company of one other human being that I tended to like. This is a wonderful thing and a pretty easy strategy for most people to get into. Alternative to that, try plein air drawing or painting. Whatever form of art you do as an artist, even if it is drawing on your iPad, just go do it outside. Go work from life. Just step out onto your back porch, your deck, your whatever. I don't want to go through way too many options there, but just get outside and work there. I like to sit out on the porch or in the little covered porch that we have here at the house when it's warm enough, and I will just draw clouds as they go by. I will draw the animals if they are close enough, and when I go up in the mountains, I like to sit sometimes and just draw the things that I see. I don't do this enough. This is actually, if I believed in New Year's resolutions, I would have this as one of mine, to get outside and draw more from life, to go exploring. I think that I actually will this year though, and the reasoning is simple. I've found a friend to do it with. I don't like doing things by myself. I'm quite introverted, but I usually like to have one other companion with me. Most of the time that's my wife, and I've got a couple really good friends that I do things with as well. But I have a friend who is a long time friend of me, my best friend from growing up, and he and I will likely try to get out into the mountains, to go exploring, maybe even camping and spending time just taking in nature and understanding a little bit more around us. It's lovely that we have the opportunity to do that here. Though we have to dodge the mountain lions and the bears, which might try to eat us, but that's its own thing. That's a different podcast there, that is. But try getting outside and working while you're sitting outside, not just going outside and taking photos and utilizing that, but actually working while you're outside. Though I must say that the next thing on my list is to photograph your source materials. So if you can't bring yourself to sit outside and actually work out there, Consider just taking the photographs. Now, this is almost like your fallback plan if you get out there and then it's like, I just can't draw today, I can't paint today, I'm so grumpy, I forgot something, my paint's dried out, whatever it is. Take some photos. Just give yourself some material to work from later. I have found, and I've heard this from other artists as well, that if you take your own reference photos, there's more emotion linked to them and you have some visual memory stored as well. And it seems like that augments the actual drawing that comes later or the painting that comes later. When you have a personal connection to the thing that it is that you're representing, it's different, fundamentally different. So consider going on little trips, little forays with some friends to take photos of things, or just always be taking photos whenever you're outside. We're very fortunate in that our phones are cameras now, and our phones often have better cameras than the cameras that we would buy. In my case, all of our photos are saved to iCloud, which is crazy, and it means that we have access to the insane amount of photographs that we take all the time, and they're backed up in multiple places. I think currently on my phone I have like 55,000 photos, which is just remarkable, considering that the first phone that I had could probably hold 10. And I don't mean that exaggeratively. I had a phone a long enough time ago that like a gigabyte of storage was probably laughable, in that like nobody could conceive of a phone actually having that much storage space on it. Remember, I had a cell phone before texting existed, so there is that. Though there might be some of you that are older that are like, I remember when cell phones came out. Consider going for a hike or a bike ride if you have access. This is kind of just a modified walk, is it not? You're just going faster or more vertically if you're hiking. And if you're going on a bike ride, you're just foregoing the concussion of your feet against the soil and you are doing something a little bit greater speed. I need to get a bike again. We just had this lovely bike park put in near us, and I took my daughter to it about a week ago, and she loved it. She fell a couple times because, you know, it's what happens. But she did a really good job. She got back up and kept going, and thank God for helmets. They're such a wonderful, wonderful thing. But yeah, getting outside for a hike or a bike ride is a wonderful thing. Any activity that you can get that is a little bit more interesting to you, maybe a little bit more exciting than just walking. So if you rock climb, do that. If you boulder, do that. Like, these all kind of come into the same category. They're just more exciting activities that get you outside. Consider working outside, just sitting on the deck, patio, or porch, whatever it is that you do. Not necessarily working on art, but just being outside in that environment more. My wife will often go sit on the deck and work out there, and she loves listening to the birds, hearing the deer walk by, and just the wind whistling through things. It's also healthier for her, and she's talked on many occasions how it just refocuses her and it helps her be a little bit more mindful of where things are. Consider meditating outside, spending time really deeply processing and thinking about your life and your existence. I've not spent a lot of time meditating personally. I know for some people it is really, really beneficial and it's been a lovely addition to their life. If that's you, then I would encourage you to try doing this outside. And if you don't know very much about meditation like I don't, then I would recommend looking it up, doing a little bit of research, because I have a lot of people in my life that I really love who really benefit from it. Collect flowers or little rocks. This might seem childish, but art a lot of the time has childish bends to it. And there's nothing wrong with collecting flowers, bringing them home and giving them to someone, or pressing them into a dried flower. There's nothing wrong with collecting some rocks, unless I suppose you're on like a historical site and shouldn't steal things, and then in which case, what are you doing? Don't do that, that's terrible. But collect things. Look for cute, pretty, intricate, interesting things while you're out and exploring. And if you aren't exploring places where you can, then maybe think about that too. How many of you came home as a child at one point just trying desperately to hold up your pants because they were full of too many rocks? I did this all the time, and I've actually experienced it now with my daughter as well. She will collect so many things, so many trinkets that are so wonderful to her that she literally has to hold her pants up. Of course, she's now smart enough and logical enough that she will just give them to me and be like, Daddy, put them in your pants instead. Which, you know, that's what belts are for, right? So get out and collect things. Look for cute things, pretty things. And sometimes you can do this via photo, but there's something about having a physical object. And if you explore a lot, sometimes you run into interesting trinkets. I've run into old traps. I've run into petrified wood. I've run into old rusty nails and hinges and things like that. And I collect them because why not? Jump in the puddles. Do random things that are going to make you messy, that are just kind of exciting, and things that you enjoyed doing when you were a child, just because you can. Catch the rain in your face. Try to make a snow angel if it's snowy where you are. Try to make snowmen. Try to just get out and build things. Make an igloo. Just get out and do things. Try sledding if you are lucky enough to have snow. Our 4-year-old loves being out in the snow, and she doesn't seem to get cold nearly as quickly as I do. So, and I love the cold, but I will go out with her and we will be out there for a very long time before she finally wants to come in, if she ever wants to come in. Though our last snowstorm, she actually started crying at one point and I had to go pull her out because what happened is she climbed over a juniper bush that was covered in snow and she fell through it. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that when she tried to climb out of it, the branches caught her boot and tore it off, and so then she had a bare foot in the freezing snow. And so yeah, suffice it to say, I went over there and pulled her out of the bush, took her inside, and then I think 2 minutes later she was saying, I want to go back outside again. It's like, no, like every part of you that's seen the snow is cold. We're taking a minute, hun. Well, as always, thank you for listening. I hope there was something beneficial to you here, and I hope you will get outside. Please, for your art's sake, for your humanity's sake, get outside. Let me know in the comments, please, whatever area of this was most interesting or you identified with the most. And as always, thank you for your time and thank you for listening. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.